Migrants to enter the country illegally. An investigative reporter tells us how, citing an internal email from Border Patrol.
An emergency alert ripping through Taiwan. See how the island responds to China launching a satellite 5 days before Taiwan's presidential election. We'll have the details soon when we return.
A caravan of about 60 migrants from Venezuela, Cuba, and Central America set off on Christmas Eve with the goal of reaching the U.S. border. But after New Year's Day, they say the Mexican government convinced them to forego their march, promising to give them some unspecified documents.
The migrants were seeking transit or exit visas they hoped would allow them to take buses or trains to the U.S. border, but the papers they received do not allow them to leave the southern state of Chiapas, which sits along the Guatemalan border. A Republican lawmaker is calling for the firing of Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. Congressman Matt Rosendale says he plans to file articles of impeachment against the Defense Secretary for high crimes and misdemeanors.
The move comes as the aftermath regarding the delayed information from the Pentagon about Austin being in the hospital last week continues to unfold. Rosendale shared a statement on X saying Secretary Austin has violated his oath of office time and time again and has jeopardized the lives of the American people.
Rosendale brought up occasions where he feels Austin endangered Americans. He mentioned the Chinese spy balloon incident, the withdrawal from Afghanistan, and allowing what he called unvetted migrants to flow into the U.S.
Presidential candidate Nikki Haley also weighed in on the controversy surrounding Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin during a Fox News town hall in Iowa.
I think Biden should be fired. This is unbelievable. First, I have a problem with the fact that Biden's not talking to his Secretary of Defense every single day anyway. Secondly, is there not enough connection that he didn't even know he was put in the hospital?
Haley called into doubt the effectiveness of Biden's communication with the military and compared it to her time as South Carolina governor.
Haley says she spoke to her chief administrative officer in the military every day as governor. The presidential candidate also listed a bunch of recent crises that could have affected U.S. security.
She mentioned the wars in Israel and Ukraine, as well as North Korea testing a missile that can reach the United States.
Haley said that China is also doing things the U.S. needs to pay attention to.
Regarding Austin's reported delay, national security...
There's 800. What have people? So can you explain to us, do they come with a bus and they just get...
Yes, initially they were coming in by buses and being dropped at 3 different transportation centers. And luckily, a lot of profits saying that he's helping the mind for about hours. Most of them have, or they know the country. And the first question they dropped off is, Grandma, San Diego is, and dropped off to my how do I port or get to my cousin in Denver or wherever it is that they want to go to. So basically, San Diego County, we're acting as a travel agency for these migrants that are just being dropped off. But now what's happening is we have asked Border Patrol to just drop them off at 1 location within San Diego County instead of 3. And all of our nonprofits and charities and people like that that are helping them are in 1 site. And we don't really know what time of day they're going to be coming. The Border Patrol is headed. So they're all in 1 location right now. But those folks are the same people that we contract with that are helping with the migrants. We contract with those people to help us with our homeless situation. And so they're asking for more money so they can have more personnel. They're asking for money from us out of our local coffers so they can aid and assist the migrants. And San Diego County, my board that I serve on, I've been against this primarily because, yes, they do need this service. Yes, the migrants need to be moved on and help, get to their final destinations. But we, the local community, should not be paying those tax dollars. So they're getting dropped off. They're getting the help, from local agencies that we, the county, are funding to help get most of the migrants on their way to wherever it is they're going in the country.
And now, what percentage of them, do you guys have any thoughts on what number has friends and family in other areas, and what number just wants to stay in San Diego? Is there?
I can't give you an exact number, but I could tell you probably well over 90% of them are gone within 48 someplace else in the country is what's happening. I can't give you an exact number, but I can tell you that some of them are staying overnight in the homeless shelters, and some of them just are staying at, like I said, at the airport. Even if country, you're not always going to get a flight out right away to wherever it is you're trying to go, which is why they're ending up sleeping at the airport. So our nonprofits and our charities, well, once they, get dropped off and they want to say go catch a flight to someplace else, they'll take them to the airport, but then they're stuck at the airport and maybe they can't get a flight out for a day or so, and they're staying there. And then some of them are also going to some of our homeless shelters, taking up space there. And they've actually, the Border Patrol has created this camp, sort of a waiting room or waiting area in the Jacumba area, which is just in the southern side of San Diego, nearer to the border, where it's just kind of a holding until they can bring them into the processing center that they're being dropped off within San Diego County. There's no facilities out there. There's no food. There's no shelter. They're just having to sleep outside at night. It's really chaos and a mess. And unfortunately, help they need. And then also the state has emptied out their psychiatric hospitals. They're trying to get out of that business. And so we're having sexually violent predators being placed in our communities. And so unfortunately the state has really put the cities in a predicament that we don't have the facilities, we don't have the mental health hospitals. The state's getting out of that business. They did just give us, like I said, through SB 43, a tool to where we can force people into treatment, but they came with no money, it came with no resources, and we have to try to figure out how to do this county by county or city by city on how we manage the homeless. So we're not being given the resources by the state of California, and I think, you see San Francisco, you see Oakland, you see Los Angeles, even downtown San Diego. The homeless are hurting our businesses, and just I think it's a black eye on society.
Now, Jim, San Diego is one of the best places in California, and California is the best part of the world, I think. Because I have this bias here. So is San Diego going through a change, or is it the same it used to be?
We're not as bad off as San Francisco or LA, but if we keep going down this path, we're going to have the same problems and same consequences. We are a beautiful part of the country, but we are also in the state. We are the county, as an Imperial County, right up against the border. And because we're the more populous area, we've got more resources and facilities for migrants to come across. So I think there's hope, and we're slowly moving in that direction, but not fast enough in my mind. And I'd like to see it happen sooner. And I know you haven't brought this up, but housing is a huge issue for the country. Well, and particularly for California. San Diego County is now the most expensive place to live in the country. We got that #1 spot. We don't really want it. But so housing is a big, big issue, and I think we need to build more housing in San Diego County. The next generation, my kids are in their 30s, the kids that are in their 20s and 30s, they can't afford to buy a house. You got to make it over $200,000 a year in this state to be able to even afford a house. So that means both parents are working.
House, right?
A basic, that's
luxury.
Yeah, and so it's a big issue that we've kind of fallen behind in housing production for the next generation, and we may lose the next generation to other states or other people like many of my kids' friends have moved out of state because they can't afford to live here. So we're losing talent. Other things, the military. I didn't grow up here. I grew up in the Midwest. I came to San Diego because I was in the Navy. I got let out of the Navy, and I decided to stay here. Met my wife. We raised a family. I was able to do that because I could afford housing. Well, and that's one of the better things about San Diego County is we've got a lot of military veterans there who've been trained in different jobs or disciplined. They know they're supposed to show up for work and things like that. So we've got a good, highly educated, trained workforce there through the veterans. But they can't afford to stay either. So I really kind of fear for our workforce and the economy of San Diego County if we don't get the housing issue under control.
Has dropped to 63% nationwide, down
You
from
wonder why.
80% who voted for him 4 years ago.
The truth is, if that election happened today between Trump and Biden, Donald Trump wins.
On the GOP side, the Real Clear Politics average of polls shows the former president leading his GOP rivals by more than 50 points.
The Satanic Temple. This is a non-theistic religion that was officially registered with the U.S. government about 10 years ago and is now recognized as a tax-exempt religious organization with the IRS. And just as a fun fact, they have their headquarters based out of Salem, Massachusetts, of all places. And this quote-unquote religion, despite its name being Satanism, claims to not truly believe that Satan exists. Instead, according to Ms. Shalise Blythe, who is the Satanic Temple spokesperson for reproductive rights, she claims that the temple treats Satan as something akin to a mascot who represents rebellion, personal sovereignty, as well as resistance. Now, if this view of theirs reminds you of that very famous quote from Charles Baudelaire, that Satan's greatest trick was persuading the world that he doesn't exist, well, perhaps the members of this temple got tricked the hardest of all. Regardless, in advancing one of their main tenets, which is complete personal liberation, the Satanic Temple created something called the Satanic Abortion Ritual. This was the ritual that we just read about in the pages of Cosmo magazine, and the reason for its creation appears to be so that the Satanic Temple can give women a religious loophole to conduct abortions. Because if a woman happens to live in a state here in America where abortions are either partially or completely outlawed, well, she can now claim affiliation with the temple and make the argument this abortion of hers is actually part of her religion. Now, the Satanic Temple organization set up their first online abortion clinic over in the state of New Mexico. They chose New Mexico for several different reasons. Firstly, they already had a fairly large contingent of members in the state, about 3,300 members. And second of all, New Mexico was the easiest state to set up this clinic because it's considered an abortion rights stronghold. New Mexico has no laws dictating time limits on abortions. There's no age restrictions. There's no waiting periods. And perhaps most important of all, it's legal to prescribe abortion pills to someone remotely and then have those pills mailed to their homes as long as they live within the borders of the state. They named this online quote-unquote clinic Sam Alito's Mom's Satanic Abortion Clinic as a reference to Supreme Court Justice Sam Alito, who is both a devout Catholic as well as the author of the Supreme Court opinion which ultimately overturned Roe versus Wade. And so this online clinic allows anyone living within the borders of New Mexico who's over the age of 17 to conduct a virtual chat and then to order their abortion pills directly to their doorstep via the internet. Now, for legal purposes, the only real requirement is that the quote-unquote client must admit to having an interest in performing a satanic abortion in order to be considered a practicing member of the religion and therefore to receive this legal loophole and the benefits that it entails. But here's the thing. As I mentioned earlier, New Mexico already has some of the most lenient abortion laws in the whole country. And so this satanic abortion clinic is not really legally necessary for the people living in that state. Instead, this New Mexico location is more like a proof of concept, a concept that the Satanic Temple is working to expand to the rest of the country. In fact, along that line, the Satanic Temple has now filed lawsuits against the states of Indiana, Idaho, Missouri, as well as Texas, arguing that those states' abortion laws violate the rights of Satanic Temple members. Essentially, the Satanic Temple is using several of the recent Supreme Court rulings in favor of
going to hell in a handbasket.
Christian baker's right to not bake a cake for a gay couple. They're using these precedents to make the argument that these laws, quote, restricting members' access to abortion infringes on their religious right to participate in our satanic abortion ritual. However, in
American communities, some recent polls also indicate declining enthusiasm among black voters for President Biden's campaign.
An election date is set to fill former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy's House seat. California Governor Gavin Newsom yesterday set a March 19th special election date for McCarthy's vacated spot.
No candidate wins a majority vote. The top two vote-getters will advance to a May 21st matchup to fill the seat. The solidly Republican 20th Congressional District is anchored in Bakersfield, California. The seat is expected to stay in GOP hands.
McCarthy announced in early December that he would step down 2 months after his historic ouster as House Speaker. McCarthy is the only speaker in history to be voted out of the job. Coming up, millions of Americans may lose internet access or face higher internet prices as early as April.
And the man who attacked a Las Vegas judge last...
So if we pass them out of either one of the committees, or I suspect we'll pass them out of both committees unanimously, they'll go to the floor. We will have a floor vote, probably by the end of the week, be my guess. And then once that vote has taken place, that resolution then would be sent to Attorney General Merrick Garland, and Attorney General Garland will have to decide whether he's going to prosecute or not.
And if you could just kind of tell us ultimately what type of evidence they're going to want to see, which it's pretty much black and white, but where this ultimately will lead.
The hearings that he, on behalf of which he was subpoenaed to come, have legislative purpose, and so we will demonstrate that with legislation that we're looking at, and the reason that we're conducting these hearings to begin with this oversight. The second thing would be, was he served with a subpoena and willfully, didn't even have to be willfully, but did he not come? And the answer, of course, is yes. I mean, he had a press conference at the exact time he was supposed to be sitting in the hearing room where I was sitting, waiting for him to come.
What other remedies does Congress have, or are there outside of Congress, to compel Hunter's deposition, and what do you expect to get out of him?
We have a different kind of contempt that we could do, but it is virtually toothless, which is why nobody really does that, right? I mean, it's a civil contempt. So, but the rest of it goes through this criminal contempt, where Merrick Garland has prosecuted Republicans who didn't show up, who, by the way, Jamie Raskin, who's the ranking member in oversight, said there is no excuse, there is no defense for not coming in, you have to come in, etc. Of course, now he's defending Hunter. The reason that Hunter is so important is because we literally have interviewed dozens of witnesses, many of him former affiliates and associates of him in business, where they've admitted that the brand that they were selling was Joe Biden. Joe Biden was making phone calls to clients, prospective clients. There were things being done that seemed to be quid pro quo. We've looked at bank accounts. We need Hunter in because he can verify or invalidate the claims of his business associates, which kind of indicate there was corruption going on, bribery going on. And this is an opportunity for him to come in. My guess is he would have taken the fifth a lot. But nonetheless, he is a vital witness. And if we were doing this for a criminal prosecution case, we would have done everything we could to get him either before a grand jury or in a witness deposition.
Where do you see the role in the Department of Justice here in terms of, you have AG Merrick Garland silent on much of this, and, how does impeding a criminal investigation fall into this? Are you concerned that the DOJ may be doing so?
Well, I mean, the DOJ has slow-walked everything from Inspector General's reports and people who've come in and testified, and this is no different. Don't forget that they suppressed the release of Hunter Biden's laptop. The intelligence community, this was not DOJ necessarily in and of itself, but the intelligence community, 51 people wrote a letter saying that the laptop's not real, it's a Russian hoax, and then all of that was fraudulent. It was real, the laptop is real. I am really concerned with DOJ because Merrick Garland is supposed to be the Attorney General who would assign a prosecutor. He has prosecuted Republicans who didn't go in and testify before a congressional subpoena. But here he wants to say, perhaps, certainly Democrats in Congress are saying, this is different. How so? You subpoenaed the Trumps. How many times did you subpoena Don Jr.? I think it was 5 times they subpoenaed Don Jr., who came in and responded to every subpoena to testify. DOJ has an obligation to be blindfolded here and actually prosecute Hunter Biden. And quite frankly, they should be looking into Joe Biden and whether he knew and was abetting Hunter Biden's criminal contempt of Congress.
Congressman Andy Biggs, thank you so much.
Thanks, Steve.